covered the nice cookies, so it's time to get a little naughty. These are those cookies that you want to hide from everybody else so you can have them all to yourself. You are definitely going to want to add some of these to your repertoire this holiday season.
I promised you some chocolatey cookies, so here are some chocolatey cookies. We call this first one chocolate chip scoop cookies because they're made by using an ice cream scoop, so they turn out super large and soft. After eating these this year, I really do think these are my favorite pure chocolate chip cookies ever. No brown butter, no fancy chocolate, it's just a better version of the Nestle Toll House cookie, and to me that is pure perfection. I'm giving you the measurements for a full batch, but we only made a half batch for ourselves. Cream 1 pound of butter with 1.5 cups of white sugar and 2 cups of dark brown sugar. I usually cream this for 5 to 10 minutes. It's a long time, but it gets you a nice texture in the final cookie. To the mixer, add 3 eggs and a large splash of vanilla. We're going to sift the dry ingredients while this runs. This is 6 cups of flour along with 1.5 teaspoons of both salt and baking soda. We're sifting this to get a really tender and light cookie in the end. The brown sugar is going to keep the whole thing moist as long as we don't overcook them. Add the dry ingredients in batches to keep the flour from making a huge mess in your kitchen, but let's be honest, it's baking, so it's gonna get messy. Add 6 cups of semi-sweet chocolate chips into the mix. It seems insane to have an equal amount of flour and chocolate chips, but the semi-sweet chips don't push this too far into the crazy chocolatey territory. There's still a balance to these cookies, especially with the extra sprinkle of flaky salt I'm gonna add to the batter to give it a little bit of extra saltiness. Dose these out to at least 2 tablespoons per cookie on a parchment-lined baking sheet. These need roughly 8 to 10 minutes in the oven at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. One of my best friends texted me this year asking if I was going to make these cookies specifically because he missed them so much. That's how good they are. They come out chewy and gooey, but they stay that way from the butter and the brown sugar. Replace your regular chocolate chip cookie recipe with these and you can thank me later. The next cookie on our list is Gobs, the Pennsylvania version of the whoopie pie. This is a granny recipe, so stick with me, it's a little bit different. We'll start by mixing 2 cups of sugar with half a cup of Crisco and 2 eggs. To the mix, add 1 cup of milk mixed with 1 tablespoon of white vinegar. This is basically creating your own tangy buttermilk at home. I don't know about you, but I almost never have buttermilk just laying around. We also need to bloom our cocoa powder, basically mixing half a cup of cocoa powder with 1 cup of boiling water. This blooming process makes the chocolate taste chocolatier, and there are lots of sciencey reasons why, explained very well in this video by Adam Ragusia. Add that to the mix along with a splash of vanilla. When incorporated, add 4 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, and 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Let that run until everything is combined. This is going to look a lot like cake batter because it pretty much is cake batter. Scoop these onto a parchment-lined baking sheet, about 1.5 tablespoons per gob. Bake these at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for around 8 to 12 minutes. Test these with a toothpick to confirm once they're fully cooked. Like a cake, you want to make sure there's no batter sticking to the toothpick. These will need to cool completely before we can fill them, so set them on a wire rack for now. The filling for these is very different than a buttercream frosting because it uses a flour paste made by cooking 1 cup of milk with 5 tablespoons of flour. I made the choice to save time by using the microwave to make this paste, which turns out pretty well, but you can end up with a few pieces of flour that join together into a lump. Heat it for 30-second intervals and stir in between until it's thickened to about this point. The microwave saved me the double boiler setup, but I passed the filling through a strainer at the end, so I kind of think it took about the same time. Set this aside and let it cool completely, which can take a while, but you can speed that up by placing it in the fridge. Do the double boiler if you want, do the microwave if you want, both ways work pretty well. In a bowl, mix together half a cup of butter, half a cup of Crisco, and a full cup of powdered sugar. Add a pinch of salt and a splash of vanilla. I'll actually measure this out for the written description. Lastly, add your flour paste and mix completely. This is super light, fluffy, and tinged with the flavor of vanilla and butter. Crazy delicious. I like to go through and match cookies of around the same size, and then spoon on a little filling to each one. Probably 1 tablespoon is enough, maybe a little more. Holiday cookies aren't really about precision, it's all kind of about having a good time. The flavor of these is like the ultimate version of a whoopie pie. Chocolatey on the outside, creamy, fluffy, delicious filling on the inside. They're amazing. If you really want to get the Oreo Cakester vibe, you could replace the regular cocoa powder with Dutch processed and end up with something that is basically an Oreo Cakester. You're welcome. Totos are an Italian Christmas cookie that my mom grew up with. They get a little special spice from some ginger and cinnamon, so they taste way more interesting than just a regular chocolate chip cookie. In one large bowl, we'll create our wet mix. Add 2 cups of sugar to 3 eggs and stir that together. Add 1 cup of Crisco and mix that with a whisk until completely smooth. Add 1.5 cups of water along with 1 tablespoon of vanilla that I definitely forgot about. It's gonna look a little bit like cottage cheese at this point, but don't worry about it too much. It's gonna all get mixed in at the end. In another large bowl, we'll work on our dry mix. To 7 cups of flour, add 1 cup of cocoa powder, 3 tablespoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of nutmeg, 2 teaspoons of ginger, and 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. This is where the distinct warm flavor of these cookies come from. Totos are cookies that people constantly try to figure out, like, what is the secret ingredient in this? Did I mention that this makes about 6 dozen cookies? If you're not feeding an army, it's probably a good idea to half this batch. Mix your wet into the dry and then stir that to combine. At a certain point, I gave up on a spoon and just went in there with my hands. It's much easier that way, and I have to roll them eventually. Lots of original recipes for this call for walnuts, but my mom never liked that growing up, so Granny replaced the walnuts with chocolate chip. Each cookie is filled with 3 dark chocolate chips, a nice little surprise when someone bites into them. Simply get a tablespoon of dough and place 3 chips in the center of them. Roll those into balls and then place them on a tray. Bake those for 8 to 12 minutes at 350 Fahrenheit. Because of the cakey nature of these cookies, it's a little hard to judge doneness. I tend to poke the sides with a toothpick, trying to avoid getting melted chocolate on it from the middle. They should sound hollow when you tap on the bottom. Another trick is actually just listening to them. You can put your ear up close, and if you hear water steaming, they're still probably not fully cooked in the middle. If all else fails, just tear one open and see if it's still gooey. While these cook and cool, whip up a quick glaze of powdered sugar and milk. This was my 7th batch of cookies for the year, so I ran out of powdered sugar, sue me. I left a third glazeless and another third got a simple syrup dip. The last third got the glaze we just made. All 3 are delicious, warm, chocolatey, insanely good. Definitely make these if you want something a little more complex than your standard chocolate cookie. If you're not allergic to peanut butter, I would bet you've had these peanut butter kiss cookies before. They're, in my mind, the perfect balance of salty and sweet. Start by mixing 1 cup of packed brown sugar, 1 cup of white sugar, and 1 cup of salted butter until fully combined. To that, add 1 cup of creamy peanut butter. Beat this and scrape down the sides until completely blended. To this wet batter, add 1/4 of a cup of milk, 2 eggs, and a few teaspoons of vanilla. The dry mix is really straightforward. Sift 3 1/4 cup of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1 teaspoon of salt together. Add that to the wet mix and let that run until completely incorporated. Once mixed, get a tablespoon and a half of dough, drop it in some granulated sugar, and place it on a tray. To me, these are a top tier cookie because of the multiple textures and options you get. Crunchy sugar on the outside, chewy peanut butter cookie on the inside, and then your choice of how much or how little chocolate you want in each bite from the kiss. I was the kid that would eat all of the outside first just so I'd have the last bite pretty much be all kiss with just a little cookie left. It was dope. Bake these at 375 Fahrenheit for 8 minutes. While they bake, get to unwrapping your kisses. If you're making a full batch, you need 72 kisses, so get some help for this. After the 8 minutes, take the cookies out and press a kiss into each one. Then bake for another 3 minutes and they should be perfect. I like using the Hershey Hugs for this as well, the white chocolate ones. They melt a little bit more, but I actually kind of like that if I'm honest. There you go, 4 flavor bomb cookies to make this year. If you've been following me on this holiday cookie journey, I've made 8 batches of cookies now. These are mostly going to friends and neighbors, and my suggestion is that you do the same. Get some help in the kitchen and deliver some cookies to your loved ones. I love you guys, and I really appreciate all your support this year. I hope this time of year is filled with joy and hope. Happy holidays, everyone.